Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a joint meeting of the Education and Culture Committee and Health and Human Services Committee. I'm joined by my co-chair, Councilmember Albernaz, and Councilmember Lukey from the HHS Committee, Councilmember Mink from the Education and Culture Committee. And Councilmember Albernaz gets to be on both committees today, which is great. It's also Take Your Kid to Work Day. And we're joined, and this is the perfect session for many of our children to be at, where we're going to be talking about programs in our schools, and Children, Youth, and Families is here. So I want to acknowledge my 4 children, Aaliyah, Addison, Ava, and William Isaiah. They're in the back there. And Mateo is here. I'm sure Councilmember Ramos would acknowledge him. Any other kids here? Yes. And we have Katrina in my office, has her 2 kids here, so you're welcome for the day off. We're really excited. I want to thank all the council staff that have put on a lot of events today. I know there's a lot going on for kids that are going to be throughout the building, so we're excited about that. Do you want to say anything about that before I go into the other stuff?
Yeah. No, it's just shout out to Mateo. It's good to see you, buddy. And it's very exciting to be here today. This is one of the days I look forward to the most every year.
Awesome. So we have 2 items that we're going to go over today. School-based services and partnerships like our Linkages to Learning programs and school health nurses. So kids, when you see those nurses, we're going to be talking about all the good work that they do today. And we're going to talk about school-based mental health services. And obviously interrelated buckets of work here. We will take votes. These are budget sessions. We expect to take votes on budget-related items that are going to be discussed by our great staff in a moment. And we had an overview of school-based wellness services back in February, the Joint Committee. So I'm excited to hear about some of those follow-ups and things we identified there. And we have leaders from Health and Human Services and OMB and MCPS here, which will be called up momentarily by Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, who's put together, as always, a great packet. And we also have Tara here as well, so we're excited to have both of them. The last thing I just wanted to mention, we know this is an important set of issues that we're talking about. Our kids, all of us visit schools, all of us have kids up on this dais. I think this might be the most, these 4 council members have the most kids of any. I think there's 14 kids represented.
Yes, there are, just for the 4 of us.
Just the 4 people right here, because we're all 4, and then Kristen's the underachiever with 2.
And not
going anywhere.
And none of my kids went to any of the they all went to school.
There you go. So the overachievers.
They must want something.
Yeah, exactly. But all of us here in our own lives, but also kids that we interact with in the school system, mental health services, school-based health and wellness services are on the top of the list. They're just having, one of my daughters was telling me, they just had the debates for the SMOB, and where Mateo's shaking his head, they piped into the schools. Everyone made their live statements of what they were going to work on for all 6th to 12th graders who get to vote. These issues come up quite often. And whether it be, access to Narcan or mental health services, these are topics that the SMOBs are talking about because it's so important to the kids. So I know we all know that, but I think it's also important to remind ourselves how critical these services are. So with that, I'll turn to my co-chair if he has any opening remarks. Okay. So then my kids, you can go if you want with Miss Katrina, and then staff can take those seats. But I'll turn it over to Miss Rodriguez-Hernandez to walk us through the packet.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. Yes, today the Joint EC and HHS Committee will be reviewing DHHS's school-based services and partnerships along with Montgomery County Public Schools. And just for the record, I wanted to note that this is the first of 3 sessions for our DHHS Children, Youth, and Family partners here. Today, we'll have the school-based health and wellness services conversation, and then on Monday, April 28th, the HHS Committee will be reviewing additional program areas under Children, Youth, and Families, and then finally, the EC and HHS Joint Committee will reconvene on May 2nd to review early care and education. So we'll have a few different discussions around children, youth, and families here in the county. And we'll also be discussing today the Lighthouse initiative under Health and Human Services. The executive's recommended increase includes $2.2 million in programmatic and staffing enhancements in the stated areas that we will be reviewing today, which are child and adolescent school and community-based services, linkages to learning, positive youth development, and then school health services under the public health services service area. And we'll be walking through each of those individual enhancements later on in the session. The executive's recommended decreases in programmatic and staffing equate to about $1 million, which we'll walk through as well. As noted, Lighthouse Initiative has included one-time funding, which is about a $66,000 decrease from the one-time funding allotted last year. And during the DHHS's overview session earlier this week, the committee had reviewed the compensation adjustments and the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice's operating budget equity tool analysis for the department there too. Council staff has identified several potential reductions for committee consideration that was not included in the executive's recommended budget per the council president's budget approach this year, which total about $704,000. And then finally, the committee will also be reviewing the executive's amendments to the High School Wellness Center and Expanded Wellness Services project. Before we move forward through the packet today, the acting chief of Children, Youth, and Families has a presentation for the committee as well. So we can go ahead.
Welcome.
Right. Good morning. My name is Lori Garibay-Aquino, Acting Chief for Children, Youth, and Families. Thank you for having me here today. I will just preface saying that I have a double ear infection right now, so it's hard to hear a little bit. So if I ask you to repeat, please just bear with me. And for any questions after the presentation, I'll ask my team to come up to help field some of those as well.
That's good.
So thank you for your time this morning. I just want to kind of spend some time going through an overview of the school-based partnership and services within CYF. Next slide. So within CYF, our school-based services and partnerships are really broken out into two of our divisions. The first being our Child, Adolescent, School, and Community-Based Services division. That includes our Linkages to Learning program, our Bridge to Wellness, and our cluster projects. And then finally, our non-somatic work within our high school wellness centers is housed within our Positive Youth Development division. Next slide. So we'll first go through the programs within our Child, Adolescent, and School-Based Health Services, starting with Linkages to Learning. So our Linkages to Learning program, as many of you probably already know, is really a community school partnership. The focus here is on integrated health and providing both students and families the support and services that they need to support healthy outcomes in school and healthy community outcomes as well. So just a quick history on Linkages to Learning. The work for Linkages to Learning really goes back to the late 1980s, which seems like a very long time ago. And at that time, the county really took an interest in the well-being of a lot of the students in our school. We were seeing that a lot of our conditions among our students were becoming more serious and complex. And as a result of that, there was a consensus that a lot of the behaviors that were being exhibited by our students in school were really the result of things happening outside of the school building. So things happening in our communities and within their families. And as a result, the Linkages to Learning program was developed. So fast forward to the early 90s, there was the first Linkages to Learning pilot. And these are the 3 schools listed here where the pilot occurred. So during this time, the goal here was really to assess and evaluate whether this linkages model could work. And of course, because of the great diversity within our county and among our schools, the Linkages to Learning pilot offered tailored cultural and linguistic services. So fast forward to today, we saw that those 3 pilot sites were very successful. And as a result, there was a request to expand the Linkages to Learning program. The Linkages to Learning team did some strategic planning and pretty much came up with a model for how to expand the program, which included looking at EverFarm's rates and doing a 6-year strategic plan as well. Next slide. So today, the Linkages to Learning program serves 32 schools. This includes 24 elementary schools and 8 middle schools. And this very hard to read slide is just kind of a geographic representation of where all those schools and the Linkages to Learning programs are located within the county. As with most of our school-based programs, we work very closely with our partners at Montgomery County Public Schools, which is what this slide shows here. And we also partner with 4 service providers to provide the Linkages to Learning services in the different schools. So those include Shepherd Pratt, the City of Rockville, Every Mind, and the YMCA. So when we look at some of our outcomes from last year in FY24, we see that a little over 80% of the families who participated in the Linkages to Learning program experienced an increase in one or more domains of family self-sufficiency. And when we look at our therapy outcomes, about 80% of our clients either improved or stabilized their outcomes as it relates to therapy within 6 months of receiving those services. We also see high levels of satisfaction among our students and our families who participated in the Linkages to Learning program. So over 90% are satisfied with the services that they received. And we also see positive outcomes in our parents in terms of becoming more involved in their school community and more involved in their child's education as well. In FY24, there was about 1,200 activities that were organized by our community school coordinators. And you can see the breakdown of the adults who participated in those and the youth who participated those as well across all of the 32 schools. And then kind of where we are right now in FY25, we have about 670 youth who have received mental health services within the Linkages to Learning program. We've served almost 3,000 household members comprising of 782 households. And there have been 604 community school coordinated activities. So looking ahead in FY26, we would like to expand the Linkages to Learning program at Greencastle Elementary School and Silver Spring International Middle School. These both include opening a new suite as part of a school renovation occurring within MCPS. And this would also increase staffing to serve within that additional space. We're also looking to add a site at Burt Mills Elementary School to really address the increased needs of the student population there as well. And we have one proposed enhancement to increase funding for bilingual therapists to assist us in an effort to recruit and retain those needed services among those bilingual therapists. So we'll move ahead to Bridge to Wellness.
Before you do that, I just want to welcome. We've been joined by some of our youngest learners here. Welcome to the Joint Education and Culture and HHS Committee. We're talking about stuff to help you guys, so glad you're here.
Perfect. So again, just some brief history on our Bridge to Wellness program. So Bridge to Wellness was really a result of the county seeing that there were some distinct behavioral and mental health needs among our students after their return to school from COVID. So the Bridge to Wellness pretty much serves students at high schools that do not already have a high school wellness center located at them. And the idea here is that the Bridge to Wellness services would kind of take care of those more pressing needs while we wait for a more comprehensive high school wellness center adoption among all schools in the future. So for the implementation, and because we work to really get those services to our students in a quick manner, the Bridge to Wellness services were kind of put into contracts that were already in place. So these are the vendors that provided the mental health services and that continue to provide those mental health services. And then when we look in terms of the youth development piece, we have Identity as the vendor for that as well. And in terms of the needed space to run a Bridge to Wellness program, it really is 2 offices and 1 conference room within the school building. So this essentially is the makeup of our Bridge to Wellness team. It includes a mental health therapist, a care manager, and a youth development specialist. And these are the 19 high schools that are currently served by the Bridge to Wellness program. So the services include, as stated earlier, mental health support, and those are provided by a licensed mental health therapist. This includes assessment and diagnosis, individual, family, and group therapy, and consultation with teachers and school staff as well. We also offer care management within the Bridge to Wellness program. Of course, this supports not only our families and our students, but our community as a whole. We include education about local resources and how to access those resources. And we really do link students and their families to available assistance and resources within the community. And when we look at our kind of youth development piece of it, these are the different activities that occur as a part of that youth development piece of the services provided within Bridge to Wellness. So looking, it's probably hard to see here, but looking at the numbers served last year, we really see the highest number of students utilizing our care management services, followed by our youth development and our intervention or mental health services. When we look at therapy outcomes, we see that a little under 90% of those receiving therapy services within Bridge to Wellness were stabilized or improved their mental health outcomes after 6 months of service. And then finally, when we look at our satisfaction, we also see high levels of satisfaction with our students and families who participate in Bridge to Wellness as well. So for FY26, looking ahead, we're looking to implement a new Bridge to Wellness contract, which would really combine all aspects of the services. So the mental health services and the youth development piece would all be put into one RFP. And our schools, we're looking to kind of group them more closely in terms of their geography to one another. And those would be listed here in the different areas. So our final project within our child, adolescent, and school-based services division would be our cluster projects. So a brief history of the cluster projects. The concept for this goes back to 2007. And then following the timeline here, the first cluster started in 2009 with our Kennedy cluster, followed by our Watkins Mill cluster, and finally our Paint Branch Springbrook cluster. So the purpose of the cluster projects is stated here, and really the goal is to improve stability for students whose families may be in crisis or have multiple needs as well. And here's just a breakdown of the schools served in the different clusters. It is important to note that the cluster projects is not necessarily school-based, but serves families from specific schools, and those are listed here. So the services provided within our clusters program includes care coordination and behavioral health navigation for families and our students. I won't read into detail, but this is just a listing of exactly what those services consist of. And as with most of our school-based programs, it really is a multi-agency model. We partner very closely with MCPS, with some of our internal divisions within HHS, and with some of our sister agencies as well, in both our community partners. So in FY24, we served a little under 300 families, and that included 1,100 household members. The cluster projects made 1,200 referrals for benefits and services to meet the client's needs. And 83% of those served within the projects, or the cluster projects, had an improved family stability score in one or more domains at case closure. All right, so moving on to our positive youth development division. and the non-somatic piece of our high school wellness centers. So just a quick history, I'm sure everyone probably knows this, but our high school wellness centers date back to 2007 and includes both somatic health services, which are provided by our public health services colleagues at HHS, and our behavioral and emotional needs or non-somatic health pieces, which is really housed within CYF. Currently, there are 6 high school wellness centers, both in the up county and down county areas, and those are listed here. So back in 2022, the scopes of the services were expanded a bit, again, to really respond to our students returning to school after COVID. And as a result of that, we now offer therapeutic recreation, extended hours, and increased our care management and mental health services within the high school wellness centers. So within our PYD team in CYF, the staffing to provide those non-somatic health services includes the roles listed here. So there's a manager, a site coordinator, a positive youth development specialist, program facilitators, care managers, and of course mental health specialists as well. And when we look at the space needed to kind of offer those services, it really includes just 4 offices and 2 conference rooms to provide those services within the wellness centers. So quickly, just looking at the number served for last year, the slides provides an overview of our youth served. So about 400 to 500 students served by school, with a breakdown of race and ethnicity, which is a little hard to see.
So my monitor just went out. Okay, so the orange line is Latino. The blue line, I guess darker blue is Black, African American, and then
Correct.
Green is Asian, and the light blue is white.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, those are really hard to see. I'd love to see
We
a
can
bigger
provide
version of that, but I think I kind of got it. Yeah. Okay.
And then for the last slide, the numbers here kind of represent where we are to date this fiscal year, which is kind of along the lines of where we were last year as well. And that concludes the quick overview for the CYF school-based services.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for that overview. I really appreciate it. I know we've got to move through and make some decisions based on what the executive put forward, but also, and then we have the opportunity to ask some. Should we ask questions if there's any questions on this now before we do that? Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Lukey.
All right. For the youth who are receiving mental health services in the program as part of the overview that you provided, what is the continuum of care plan for them during the summertime when school is not in session?
Thank you for that. I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to ask my colleagues who really own this work to come up to answer those questions.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kirsten Anderson, so I'm the administrator for Linkages to Learning and Bridge to Wellness. So for Linkages and Bridge to Wellness, the staff are year-round employees. And so for Linkages, they have their dedicated suites in the schools, and so they just continue providing the services. It doesn't change. They're flexible, so they may be doing some virtual services if the families just can't make it to the school, or if the family's traveling, if that is going to work better for the family to keep them engaged. So these do drop off a little bit just because families get busy during the summer.
Right.
But it is completely available to them for Bridge to Wellness. They're sort of embedded in the high school. Sometimes it's a little harder to access their office, but same thing. They can offer virtual services. They can meet someone in another location, and so they will and they're year-round, so they will do whatever they need to, stay in touch with the kid and provide as many services as the kid is comfortable with. Kids also, high schoolers during the summer may not want to participate in therapy quite as much because they're on a school break, so, but yeah, the therapists remain engaged with them.
Well, and then that was going to be my next question, which is based on last summer, right? Knowing we've got summer coming up, what did you see or experience in terms of diminished participation in the summer? And what might you have learned from that in terms of other, I'm going to use the term creative ways to engage the participants during the out-of-school time?
So for linkages, yes, each summer we do have a bit of a drop-off, so the sessions may not be weekly, but, do they become every other week? Type thing. Therapists sometimes will run camps, and so the goal in the summer is really, yes, just to maintain the relationship and be available for them. So, yes, camps, meeting them elsewhere. So kind of the creativity is, using the virtual sessions. For Bridge to Wellness, because we're actually in the middle of the RFP and the transition will happen this summer, I can't really speak to that because we don't know what the new contracts, we don't know who the new contractors are. So,
Right. Okay.
So for future summers, definitely, and learning from what we did is, again, just being creative, working with maybe your youth development specialist to have activities that attract the kids. The therapist can be there as well. So you're probably providing kind of a mental wellness services and engaging them in activities that just, again, promote stress reduction, anxiety reduction, teach good coping skills, that type of thing. So they can sort of continue to see them, continue to provide services. And yes, we do encourage a lot of creativity, and we encourage them to, especially for the high schools, to adjust their hours, because kids are not awake at night.
No, they are not.
So, really adjusting your hours, so maybe your day is starting at noon and going later when your kids are actually awake.
Right, yes. A lot of life for teenagers and middle schoolers does not happen till afternoon, either on weekends or all summer long, so.
Yes, that'll be part of the new contract as well, is that very specifically it says during summer, adjusting your hours to best
Right.
needs of the kids.
Great.
Yeah, not doing that 8 a.m. schedule anymore.
Great. And Mr. Cardona?
Yes. Good morning, Luis Cardona, Senior Administrator of Positive Youth Development Program. Same applies for the wellness centers. I think we've been fortunate because of those additional funds that came through in 2022 that allowed us to always expand hours, not just during the weekends, but after school in the evening, which have been critical because many of the young people that we're serving have financial responsibilities for their families.
Right.
So sometimes they can't come to a program right immediately after school, but they can come back to the campus later on at night.
Right.
So we've been very fortunate. The school administrators have been really open about allowing us to have those services during those later hours, and especially on the weekends as well. The other piece to it around the social emotional piece, which happens a lot more during, not just during the summer, but extended school breaks, have been a lot of those clinical, more
Right.
psychoeducational or therapeutic approaches that involve everything from gardening to more leisure activities. And that's something that a lot of the PYD staff, take the lead on in terms of providing for the students. The other piece, though, beyond just the students, remember in the wellness centers that we serve the whole family. So if that child who is enrolled in that school has a younger sibling, of course that child, if he or she does not have access to mental health services, they are able to access it there. The only thing is that they would not be able to participate in the PYD program because of the age differences,
right.
Age gaps.
Sure.
Same thing holds true for family members. The parental, the family strengthening pieces and all that, it's available during that time. And then lastly, in the current reality that we're all living, where folks are just scared to go anywhere right now, there has been an adjustment made to offer the virtual piece, but also a push to get staffing out into the community to go to the homes as well, which I think in all, and even in PYD is a direction that we've moved on.
Good. And then I noticed one of the slides, it talked about the, positive outcome, no change, negative outcome. And then there was a subsequent slide that talked about satisfaction with the program. And obviously it was like super high satisfaction with the program, but the high percentage of satisfied with the program didn't match the positive and or neutral outcome numbers. So I was wondering if you could speak to what the criteria are that are used to determine when there is a negative outcome, and then with respect to that, if 98% of folks are having a positive experience with the program, even if there's a negative outcome, are they persisting in the program? Sorry.
So for the therapy services, we use a PSC 17, pediatric symptom checklist 17 for our kids. And so it's they do it every month. And so in the end, when you're looking at the outcomes, you're looking at the first baseline versus the end. And so it's a way to get a validated measure to see what the change has been for those therapy clients during the time that they receive services. And so any therapy, there's always going to be kids in therapy who get worse. That's just happens.
Sure.
With that. So, and then the outcome measures, the satisfaction surveys, they're administered to everyone. So if you're looking at a Bridge to Wellness or Linkages to Learning, the outcome that we were looking at was just for therapy, but the satisfaction surveys, that family could have maybe just gotten case management.
Right. Okay.
Or just the youth development services. So it's a different set. It's the broader picture
Gotcha.
for all of the services. In terms of if the kid is getting worse, we may make a determination that they need a higher level of care. So it may be a referral to something that's a little bit more intensive than we can provide at Linkages and Bridge to Wellness. We know our limitations there, and so that may happen sometimes. I don't think there's necessarily them dropping out.
Right.
It might
Good.
only be if we determine that they need something higher.
And for when you have the need for higher level of acuity with more specialized services, are you able to find appropriate referrals for them who can take them? Given we know the challenging landscape we're in, and especially for higher acuity adolescent patients, it's really challenging to find the right folks.
And so we are able to access DHHS's, child and adolescent, because they do have access to the psychiatry for that. So yes, there are places, and so if you have enough time, you can kind of navigate through the wait list. So we wouldn't discharge someone until they have a landing spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we would
Yes.
definitely
Thank
work
you.
with them, and so it can be the recognition that yes, we know we're not the right level for you, but obviously we're going to keep hanging on to you and maintain you as much as possible till we can get you to the next place that can handle you a little bit better.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's really critical, because these systems are not easy to navigate at all. So I greatly appreciate
They
that.
definitely will hold on to them. Unless if there's been a psychiatric hospitalization, the hospital is recommending something different.
Right.
They'll follow something that way, but they may still even maintain them then. Again,
Gotcha.
With the record.
Or do a check-in or.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
maintaining you for this until you get to your next home.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just to add, on our end, in the wellness centers, it's the same thing that would apply. The only difference being, though, that in our contracts currently, in all the contracts, there is a requirement, like, say, for example, if there's a wait list. So if there's a wait list for the behavioral health component, there's a protocol that within 24 hours, there must be a referral.
Right.
We do have the strong connection with our behavioral health partners and to make sure they can respond immediately or help us find that resources as well. But then the other piece, though, is the role of the case manager that is working there and ensuring that they're looking at ways. I mean, the one thing, kudos to the work Identity has done, because they've gone above and beyond, kind of out of the box in their approach in recognizing that there is a shortage of what you talked about in this county. I think we all know this professionally and personally. And but with that said, they've also been really smart about bringing on culturally based approaches that provide at least a safe space for young people, maybe in a group setting, to deal with some of those issues that they may be struggling with, that sometimes it may not be what you traditionally would say is like therapy, but it does become therapeutic to an extent.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and thank you. I think maybe it would be a great, woo, sorry, that was, kids don't learn from me. That would be a great thing for us to do a joint session on in the fall, so we can do sort of like a post-summer wrap-up and check-in, I think would be
See
great.
how things are going.
Yep,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Great idea. So just to set context, I'm going to go to my co-chair. We're just going to ask we're asking general questions about what was presented, then we will get into the decision points, starting with linkages. But first I'll turn to my co-chair, Councilmember Robert.
Thank you all very much. Every time I see the cluster project, I can't help but think of Fran Brenneman, who's no longer with us, of course, but her legacy was extraordinary in establishing that program and a lot of other things too. So a couple of general questions. I believe, if I'm correct, that the schools that have been presented for additions all have high number of refugee families and a number of multinational families. I just wanted to confirm that's accurate.
So for linkages, Burnt Mills falls into that, and then Silver Spring International Middle School and Greencastle, they were actually, it's OBI as part of the CIP process. So not specifically higher levels of refugees, but definitely the Burnt Mills.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And very relevant, because as has been the theme of all of the budget discussions we've had so far, and probably sadly over the next couple of years, the world has changed in the last few months. And the need for these additional support services have taken on a new light. And the connectivity that families are feeling with these schools and the staff who see them, who take care of them, is even more relevant. So if you could just talk briefly about, for example, at the beginning of this school year, the concern that families had about misinformation and about showing up for school in the first place. I would assume that there's, as there always has been in the past, a strong partnership between linkages, the wellness centers, and the school administration to holistically reach out to families to alleviate any potential concerns they have or potential misinformation that's in the community. But can you talk briefly about that coordination of communication between these incredible support services and the school administrations?
So from the wellness center perspective, that is something that they really took off running on that piece. I mean, again, the relationships that the wellness centers staff and the coordinators have had with the administrators, but even with Charlotte K's folks in central office has been really critical as well to respond to it, because one thing is the correct information, but then the other thing is doing it so in a way where you provide a space that is safe, that helps to address the immediate trauma that the families are going through. And so kudos to that level of work, that level of collaborative partnership. Has been extremely helpful, and we hope that continues on as we continue in this madness.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think moving forward, at a macro level, tracking school attendance records is going to be an important part of this story, because I would assume, as has been in the past, these kinds of relationships make it more likely that a student will actually come to class and to receive these support services, but also because they feel more comfortable and secure. So all the more reason why it would be difficult to scale back, particularly now, because the ramifications of us not providing these support services, especially in light of all of the additional challenges that these families are facing, will have even more negative impacts. So it's an even wiser investment than it was before. I will pause there, and I have specific questions regarding some of the budget line items as we go through, but just wanted to set that context.
Sounds good. Yep. And I also wanted to mention, and I'll say this again as we go through the items, we know, and I'd ask you to just say a little bit about caseloads, just so we set the context of, when we make the decisions later, each, whether it's linkages or Bridge to Wellness, you've got the therapist, the case manager. Let's just do Bridge to Wellness. You've got the therapist, the case manager, and the youth development specialist at the 19 high schools. What are those caseloads looking like?
So for therapy, we generally always have full caseloads. For that, it might take a
Full
month.
defined as?
Yes, I was about to get there. So the contract is 19 So minimum of 19. So they may have more on there. Maybe they have a kid who's not showing up all the time, and so just having more so you can have kind of fill in spaces for it. So, but it's about 19 for a therapist. For the youth,
Individual clients.
yes, thank you. Yes.
And do they stop at that point?
It will depend, again, on how frequently they're seeing the kid. So again, if you have a kid who's maybe missing school or having a little trouble, they're trouble seeing them weekly, they may be up to like a 23 because they can fill in some other kid for that week that maybe they didn't see that client or they couldn't reschedule them to get them in there. So yeah, so 19 is supposed to be the minimum. And it, again, will be based on, how frequently they're able to have the sessions with the clients that they have. If every kid is there and doing it weekly, then you're kind of at a 19 to 20. If they're not there every week, then you can go a little bit higher.
And that's a function of the contract or the function of the need?
The need's always going to be way higher. There's just limits to how many therapy sessions you can do.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes.
I just think.
There's
we hear
definitely
all the time, there's some people they don't even, I hear from students, I don't even try to go because I can't get, there's no point in me going.
Yes, the need is always higher. So yes. So yeah, one therapist at a school who can serve 19 kids. They may do a group. So maybe they have, 17 kids on their caseload and they're running a group with like 8 kids or something like that. I mean, that's another way to see more kids there. But you think about a school that has 2,000 kids.
Right.
Bridge to Wellness, the therapy clients are prioritized to those who have no insurance or cannot access their insurance or access therapy. So for kids who can see a therapist through their insurance, that's not who Bridge to Wellness or Linkages is seeing. We are there to catch all the people who just cannot get it, who cannot get the therapy anywhere else.
I would love to have a better sense, and this is, we can do this outside of budget, but of how we are tracking that population, right? So we're trying to target it for folks who don't have insurance, who need the services. I'd like to have a better sense of what that need is, school by school, and how we're dealing with either the referrals or how we're triaging in that. That's one level of triage, right? Like kids that have insurance versus don't. But then even within that group, how are we having a full assessment of the need and then triaging through that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we definitely do that. We've opened it up if there's a really long waiting list they have insurance, but there's a long waiting list. We'll see them for some brief treatment until they can access their private insurance carrier, 3 months later or something like that. So yes, we do have them go through and identify what the barrier is for it and why they can't access it. So is it language, is it income, is it transportation, that type of thing.
And you document that?
Yes, we have asked, our partners do provide that to us of why. Yeah.
But we can dig into it, just so you know, I'm coming at this.
Okay, great.
I want to get a better assessment of where we are so that because I think it's really important. We're going to talk about things in a minute where should we do reductions? We're scraping the surface here, in my view. And so that's a part of the context. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just from the Wellness Center perspective, it's typically caseloads around 20 maximum. You are talking about 2 full-time behavioral health practitioners in there, but again, don't lose sight. And I think all of you have been hearing me talk about this since the pandemic, right? This is why when you and Hans had funded that therapeutic recreation component, it was so critical because we knew, for one, like Councilmember Huki said, there is a lack of those practitioners in this county. And so we weren't going to twiddle our thumbs and just hope they went away. We had to figure something out. And so providers stepped up and said, okay, well, let's go with other best practices. If they're saying that gardening works very well to address trauma, let's figure out how we push that. If we see that this fitness model, that whether it's Club 480 or Rec Mode or doing it, let's feed into that, because that in itself might be what gets those young people the support that they need. But we also do acknowledge that there are some young people that need some very serious help, medication, other things of that nature. And so that's when that triage and that collaborative effort is important. I'll add that the other piece, though, is that the need is huge. Even we can't forget about those kids who are insured. Right? And then the fact that in our systems, and this is something that Raymond Krall used to talk about all the time, that our behavioral health system in this county is very westernized. And so has for many years lacked cultural proficiency to really meet our constituencies of where we're at, what MoCo looks like in 2025. And so in essence, that requires us to think outside the box and not necessarily go with solely a model that is about the clinical piece. Not to say that we don't need it, but it's like we need to,
Yeah.
to make sure we
Both ends.
expand that and we don't forget even those young people who are insured because they need that as well.
Well, it's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on the African American Health Program, where they are having folks with insurance, and the number one thing they provide is mental health services with providers that are African American in that context. To your point, so just something to flag to come back to. Councilmember Mink, and then we'll move on.
Thanks very much. These programs are so important. This is some of what our constituents, not even just the parents, but the kids, are asking for more of all the time on a regular basis. So 2 questions from the inspired by that presentation. One on slide 152 on mental health support. It notes that per Maryland state law, students 12 and older can consent for therapy services without the knowledge of their parent or guardian. That is so critically important. So I'm glad that we're able to make that happen. It also says that the therapist is not required to provide therapy to the youth without parent or guardian consent. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Maryland state law. So the therapist needs to assess if the youth is at a place where they can sort of fully consent for what they are asking for. So they're going to assess that kid. Are they mature enough basically to say, yes, I want these therapy services without my parent knowing. I know what I'm kind of getting into. So that's why the therapist needs to do an assessment of the youth before determining, yes, we're going to see this kid without the parent's knowledge and having the youth provide the consent. So wanted to put it in there so it's just not an automatic. A 12-year-old says, hey, I want therapy. The therapist actually needs to assess what that situation is because there's a lot of implications for not informing a parent that a kid is in therapy. So the therapist is going to do a full assessment of it and kind of see, does this make sense? Is there a need for it? What is it? Is it just the kid, I just don't want to tell my parents? Or, there might be dire consequences if they did tell their parents, but they need the mental health support.
Is that component also part of state law
Yes,
that
that's
the
state
therapist is not required? Nothing we could do for that on the county level.
Yeah, so that's the interpretation of the state law. So
Got
that's
it.
the state law who determines.
Got it. Okay.
Not us. Yeah.
I will just, I have some concerns about that because, what if you have a kid who doesn't feel safe and comfortable offering that information up to a therapist until they have met several times and built that relationship, and they're not going to have the opportunity to build that relationship and reveal that difficult information. What they're going to just be left with is the experience of being rejected for therapy.
It is very tricky and nuanced to try and balance the needs of the youth and the parent guardian
Yeah.
in those situations. So yes, I absolutely agree with you.
Really critical to have the right people in place here. Yeah.
And that's the key to the wellness centers in particular because the bread and butter it's not necessarily the behavioral health piece. It's who that PYD practitioner is and how they're going to engage with the student or his family or her family. I mean, it's bottom line, the relationships that are built there at the end of the day is what's going to be most critical.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you. And then on the page about the history of the health and wellness centers, we have there some of the history of the wellness centers. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of the history of the somatic component and the health center component. I think that's 168 is where that's 168, 169 is where that's kind of laid out.
So I got to come up here, but to his benefit, having been around since the conception of the Wellness Center model, it was both the somatic health side and then the PYD administration that did a series of assessments and went to Prince George's County, looked at what their wellness centers were doing, and then at that time, one of the council members, Mike Subin, had tasked us to say, okay, that's nice, but what can we do differently? And hence, that's what brought about this combination of PYD services with the somatic health service.
Got it, thanks.
Becca Urgesa, Senior Administrator for School Health Services. I'm happy to provide the slide information for the history, but just like mentioned earlier, that was, the main reason with the history, but the exact dates I'm happy to provide later on with the slides.
So those were introduced, and then where have we kind of gone from there, and where are we going?
Yes, so it's a collaboration work, it's a teamwork with the other programs, with the CYF programs for the Wellness Center, yeah.
So, because what I'm seeing is we have 6 of them, right? And we have the schools that have the full high school wellness centers also have the full health centers. And I think the vision had been to have, as was noted, to have full centers at all of our high schools. And I thought that the vision had been to have full health and wellness centers at all high schools, but it sounds like now the vision is to be moving towards just full wellness centers and not health and wellness centers. So if we could talk a little bit about that. Just, I mean, obviously, like, we don't have unlimited funds, it said like this, but I just want to make sure that we're really clear and transparent about what's happening and why.
So, when we were here for the SIP, I think we had talked about we had done a prioritization study to really identify, using the data, which schools and communities, given the limited resources, would benefit the most from a school-based health and wellness center. So we are actually in the process of...
Introduce yourself as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Hi. Hi, yes. Nina Ashford, Chief of Public Health Services. So we're actually in the process of restarting that so that we can look at the updated data, take into consideration some of the upcoming boundary studies, some of the new facilities that are going to be open, collaborate with the SIP process. And so we're just beginning that process now. The team has a meeting in the next couple of weeks. So we are happy to come back to you guys to share that information once we have it available, as far as kind of what would the recommendation be. I think really at the end of the day, the school-based health and wellness centers offer a great opportunity to be able to see kids in school and keep them in school and not have to, it's also a great benefit for parents. As you guys know, our Care for Kids clients are assigned there as well. We just changed the criteria, eligibility criteria, because before you could only receive services at the school in which you were enrolled. We've actually made that a little bit more expansive, so there's more flexibility for kids to seek care at other school-based health and wellness centers. But all of that to say, we're in the midst of doing that updated analysis and are happy to bring that back to you.
Great, yeah, would love to dive into that in more detail. I know we've talked about this kind of on an ongoing basis, and as budgets are in flux, these conversations are going to continue to be in flux. There are just so many different variations as we try to figure out from a fiscal perspective how to make as many services as possible available to as many kids as possible. We have so many iterations here. It would be great to have some kind of comprehensive layout of, we're going to talk more about this, but we've got the wellness center and bridges and what connections, and then we've got the health center, no health center, et cetera. It would just be great to be able to have something that has not only the breakdown of, and this packet is starting to get there, but it would be great when we have more time outside budget to go in even more detail, where we also have the outcomes side by side for each of those and the cost, so that we can just really make some, understand how those decisions are being made, and to include, as I think Chair Albornoz alluded to also, like absenteeism as some of the outcomes, because we know that all of these things, even though they're tangentially related to, for example, academic outcomes, for example, we know that they're related, that they're having an impact. And so if having, say, a full health and wellness center is having a huge impact, positive impact on our absenteeism rates, and we can then presume on our academic outcome rates as well, versus having a wellness center, then that's an investment that we want to think about making, and that's probably why you would then ask for funding for that, right? So for us to be able to understand that full picture, or like the wellness center versus bridges, as we're thinking about on the CIP side, how much space we're going to build in and all that, we've talked about this so much, but I feel like we just have not gotten all the information in one place to be able to really side by side it and compare the costs at the same time.
Agreed, and I think that's something good to follow up with. I always have deja vu up here, but especially during budget, because we kind of talk about everything that we've talked about the whole year. So, Councilman Albernas.
Yeah, just really quickly, I appreciate the point. Totally correct. We had a session in February before HHS where we talked about not all of the components you mentioned, Councilmember Mink, but I think we were planning on having a follow-up session post-budget, and we'll make sure that it's at a time available for everybody who's interested, and I appreciate your interest in this very important topic.
Did you have something you want to say? I see your hand reaching.
I just wanted to make sure the question was answered. I think Chief Ashford did a great job, but if there was any outstanding question about the methodology behind the decision and council's justification last year, I was happy to provide other detail. But it sounds like your question was answered.
For now.
Yeah, happy to circle back.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, back to you. Probably longer than you thought, but.
No, it was
back to you.
perfect.
Okay, good.
It was amazing programmatic information and updates and background to many of the budget discussion items the committee will be reviewing now. So very important to have, and thank you all for the information you've provided. So digging into the county executive's recommendations for the proposed changes in the service areas and program areas that we will be reviewing today, we are starting with linkages to learning. So there are 3 enhancements that the executive has recommended, and we'll walk through each one of them for the committee's review. And you'll also note that council staff, per the council president's memo, has provided potential reductions to add to the reconciliation list based on what has been proposed. We received the great background on the linkages to learning program and understand the need and the services they provide. And the first program, as mentioned by the acting chief, Garibe Aquino, is the transition of part-time linkages to learning programs at Greencastle Elementary School and Silver Spring International Middle School to full-time services. That is, as mentioned as well, associated with the transition of having the linkages to learning suites available at MCPS to be able to hold full-time services. Council staff will note that as of February, there was the expectation that both of the full-time suites would be prepared and available by August 2025, but just wanted to recommend to have an update on that in case there have been any changes since that conversation in February as well. For Greencastle Elementary School, the transition to full-time is about a $100,000 increase, and that would add an additional full-time family care manager, where it is expected to be able to serve now from 30 families a month or students a month. And then the second is a full-time child family therapist that would be able to serve from 10 to 20 clients a month as well, and the associated increases in operating and supervisory time. And then for Silver Spring International Middle School, it's about $114,000, which would add a full-time family care manager, which would help serve from 15 to 30 families a month, and then a community school coordinator, which is expected to double the number of classes, workshops, and services provided to the school community and the associated operating and supervisory time as well. So as mentioned before, per the council president's budget approach, council staff recommends for consideration tranching the enhancement proposed by the executive, one for each school, so $100,000 for the transition to full-time linkages to learning at Greencastle Elementary, and then about $114,000 for the transition to full-time at Silver Spring International Middle School. And again, we just also invite MCPS to come up to see if there's any additional status updates on the full-time suites available at those schools.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I think this is a good first start here, and I think the first order of business is to hear an update from our MCPS partners about the August 2025 and just where we are and status on that. And let's start with that. So please introduce yourself. Sure. Yourselves.
DJ Conley, Capital Budget Manager for MCPS.
And Adnan Mamoon, Chief Operations Officer for MCPS. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to give an update this morning. For the Greencastle Elementary School, we have the the addition project over there ongoing, and it's on track, and for it to get opened on time. For the Silver Spring,
So on track meaning next school in the fall.
August of 2020.
Okay, great.
For the Silver Spring International Middle School, the scope for the project was divided into two parts, mainly one addition that's under construction right now, and then we had the interior renovation, which included the expansion of the Linkages to Learning. The existing portion of the building, we have had some challenges with unforeseen conditions because of the fact that building was built decades ago and had additions over multiple decades. So as far as the schedule is concerned, the good news is the addition is going to complete on time and be available for August of 2025. For the interior renovations, we have gotten into some challenges because of the existing conditions. We had to do some additional investigation just to come up with a design, because there are some changes to the building codes that has been challenging to meet. And we have recently received a proposal for the interior renovation, which is, exceeding our, anticipated budget for the project. So we're in the process of evaluating right now. We don't have a timeline for that completion of the project at this point. What we can commit to doing is providing an update to the council in the next 2 to 3 weeks, where we see that timeline for that interior renovation is going to take place. What we can do in the meantime is also work with the school administration to potentially work on identifying some temporary spaces that can allow for the Linkages and Learning program to take place in the temporary basis while we work on coming up with a timeline and a plan for the interior renovation for the project.
Just so we're 100% clear, Greencastle Elementary will be done and ready to go August 2025.
That is correct.
Okay. Sims, Silver Spring International Middle School, you're having challenges. You don't have a timeline. You'll come back to us in a couple of weeks, but you think you're going to try to work with them to figure out another space in the building so it could start on time. Is that a fair characterization of what you're saying?
That is correct. So we would have to work with the school administration in order for us to locate some temporary spaces.
Well, I know that it won't be the band room because the ceiling fell in yesterday there, and that school has some serious challenges. I just saw the video this morning. I know there's facilities out there today. I think you're aware of that.
Correct.
That's something that had been a problem. Thankfully, no student was hurt, but it was a pretty scary video. It fell right on top of people. So the reason I bring that up is because in the context of these potential reductions and when we're trying to save money, it seems like Greencastle's ready to go. Sims might not be. Not that there's not the need, but that just the physical space might not be ready to go. Is that a fair characterization?
That is correct.
Okay. Yes. So let me go to my co-chair, and then I'll go to the district council member for at least one of these schools. Councilmember Ramos.
So I think all of us are probably pretty familiar with Silver Spring International Middle School. In fact, when I was at Whitman, Blair was there, and so it's been there really. In fact, my dad graduated from there, so I'm skeptical that we'll be able to accommodate the space needed to be able to implement a program with fidelity, acknowledging the space limitations that already exist within the school and how many students are already enrolled. And so I fully appreciate and respect the challenges architecturally and from a construction perspective that building brings. So I do not at all fault you guys for having these challenges, but I also think we need to be realistic and set everybody up for success here, and also the school administration, which on a good day is trying to, juggle all of the myriad of different programs and services both in and out of school. So I'd love to hear from my colleagues in DHHS, just operationally hearing that you may not have the space that you would need and is identified. Would it make sense to hold off on implementation until that space is available, or do you feel otherwise?
So yeah, programmatic updates. So currently at Sims, they have 2 offices, which is again why we have one full-time therapist and we have one staff who does community school coordination and family care management. So because they just have the 2 spaces. So we do have that space in Sims right now. So yes, in order to expand, we would need the additional space, and so it would make sense to wait until we actually have the Linkages suite. So it's then making it a full-time family care manager and a full-time community school coordinator. So we do still have a full-time therapist there. So yes, it does make sense to wait on that because there's just physically not the space that we have in the building right now. It can be, yeah, very difficult to find space because we do want space that's all together. If we're going to expand the community school coordination, you want some sort of external facing space where community members can come in and do group activities and things like that. So for Sims, for Greencastle, again, if you're looking at budget stuff, so Greencastle actually has been able to increase their family care manager and therapist. And so I would say there's less, if you're looking for places, there's less priority for the additional funds. Again, OBI funds are, planned however many years in advance. So they are at a full-time status already. So if you are looking for places, Greencastle, the funds could be used to add an additional full-time staff, but right now they actually do have a full-time therapist and full-time care manager there at Greencastle. I hope that answered your question.
So just to, it sounded like you said probably makes sense to wait at Sims.
Yes.
In Greencastle, you think they have what they need based right now?
Yes, so the additional would be,
I heard had what you have.
Yeah, well, I'm characterizing, but you can correct me. Again, I started that no one has what they need because
Yes,
there's
thank you.
need
Yes, well
that
said.
exceeds.
Yes.
But they have a full-time therapist.
full-time right now, yes.
So maybe just restate what you said, because I felt like I heard you say the
Cautiously stating things.
yeah, and I know you got the county executive's budget. The budget as introduced includes additional money for Greencastle. How would that money be utilized?
So right now, it would be utilized to look and see if there's a third position that would be needed at Greencastle. But Greencastle does have a full-time therapist and a full-time family care manager. So it would be assessing if a third position could be used there, but there's a chance it may not need to be used.
So the money would be used to assess if a third position.
No, sorry.
No, this would be the third position.
It would be the third position.
Right.
So
So why would we have a recommendation to add something if we're not we haven't assessed?
old OBI, I will own it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to turn to the district council member, but I mean, I just think if there's not an assessment of whether it's needed, we shouldn't be adding the money. I mean, you could always come back with a supplemental if once you do the assessment. Yeah. So, all right, but let me turn to Councilmember May.
All right, well.
Sorry.
No, I mean, hey, we need money for stuff if it's not needed. This is a very high need school, as we all know. And so, we all saw that map with that dot at Greencastle. Can we go back to that map? Yes, right. And the services that are provided to these students through linkages often have a positive impact on the whole family beyond that one student, right? And so again, we've got that dot hanging out there all by itself up in Upper East County up there. And so to ask for one more person there, to me, that ask made a lot of sense. And we need to be responsible with the funds, so I'm really disappointed that there was not an adequate assessment as to whether this should be a top priority. But again, it would not surprise me if it was. I mean, this is what, 86, 87% farms at this school. This is one of the areas where we're seeing, which has continued to, the need is increasing, right? We can expect that need to continue increasing at a more rapid clip than it has in other areas. And so, I'm concerned about putting this position on a cut list when I would not be at all surprised if an assessment came back to say that we could use one more person in this part of the county here serving this community. And we'll talk about Burnt Mills in a second also. So I would ask if we do decide to put this on the rec list, if we can try to get some more information before we get to full council. Great. Okay.
We're in the renewal process right now, and so we're working with the agency to determine the needs. I mean, I can get it back to you by the end of the week.
Okay, great, thank you. And then in regards to Sims, you know, if they're not going to have the space, then they're not going to have the space. If we could also, though, just get an update from the administration at that school as well, just to confirm that they wouldn't be able to do that, because, you know, the last thing that we need is another way in which that school community feels underinvested in.
Yeah, I agree, and I think given this, I'll suggest to my colleagues that we put both on the rec list, as you recommended, and then we get the information. I agree with Councilmember Mink. Like, when I saw that, it seemed to me that I came into it saying, well, yes, we should expand at Greencastle, but because of just knowing the community and the schools and that it's out there on an island and who's there, but we should do it based on actual information. And so I just want to make sure the recommendation was to tranche it, and what was the recommendation?
Yep, it was the option for the committee to place both or either school onto the reconciliation list, so the 100,000 for Greencastle and or the 114,000 for Silver Spring Intermediate.
Yeah, I think separating it makes sense because they're in different situations, and so we might end up doing one and not the other. If there's a way that we can just make sure we note for colleagues as we get this new information what the reasoning is, and we can discuss it, obviously, because we could always take it back off when we get to full council. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The Sims one, again, I think space is space. I'm looking again at that dot, and I'm really concerned that I think it's likely that we come back and that we hear that it is more than reasonable to add a person there, because if we look at this just a little bit broader than the dot, and maybe there's already 2 people on that dot, but there's also 2 people in a much larger area than that, right? And so I think not having that holistic view when, you know, these are clusters, I don't think that makes a lot of sense and is equitable. So I would actually request that we instead not put that on the rec list, but we can still return and get an update for it at full council. We can still at that time, and if there's not adequate need for it, then there's not. We can still when we receive that update, we can still make a motion. We can still make a motion to pull that out of the budget, and I would be supportive of that if there's really not the adequate need there. But I'm very concerned, and I see it as really a serious equity issue to leave that to fight out with other stuff on the rec list by default.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is a kind of a different exercise. Normally, we're talking about the cut list, really. I shouldn't be really even saying the rec list, in the sense that these items are both included in the county executive's budget as presented. So what the recommendation from staff was to remove them and put them on a recommended reduction list. So what Councilmember Mink said, I feel like we can take care of Sims. Does everyone agree that we remove that and put that one on a recommended cut list? So we'll do that. So the discussion now is whether we just
pending update, right?
Pending update. Whether we maintain the Greencastle on and get the information and then make a decision, as opposed to preemptively putting it on the cut list.
And I think, and Councilmember Mink can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't I ask for this in a sort of, we had an issue in public safety the other day where I said this needs an asterisk next to it, because it was really that we were waiting for more information. So we were not saying this is a rec list item as in a cut list, but it was an unresolved issue. And so they said they would put an asterisk next to it to distinguish it from the other items, but that way procedurally it comes up before full council, which was the sidebar I was having here. And I did want to ask and affirm, my stepson attended Greencastle Elementary. And so having been there at the school a lot before the pandemic happened, the needs were pretty significant before the pandemic. And having talked to teachers and support staff there more recently during Ramadan, they've lost a significant number of seasoned teachers at that school because of the challenges, right? So one, we're not meeting the needs of the children and their families, and two, we're not able to keep our teachers in that building, our experienced teachers who are going to be able to make the most impact with that population of kids who have significant needs. And so I just wanted to make sure that the staff and teachers, support staff, everyone is included in that evaluation as you're making that assessment with respect to that school, because it impacts everyone in the building. So thank you.
Great point. Councilmember Alvarez.
Yeah, and just, there is a third door. I agree with the approach. But I think if we're not able to and don't have sufficient information to be able to move forward, because we have a lot of difficult decisions we're going to make, this is one of many. Chair Council Vice President Jawando mentioned, supplemental can come through. And so we want it to go forward, but if it can't for some reason, this is not the only bite at the apple. And it takes a while to hire these positions and bring them on anyways, to reflect the reality on the ground. But I concur with Councilmember Mink's recommendation.
Okay, so just as I understand the recommendation for our staff is that we will put Sims on the recommendation for a reduction list and not in main.
Reconciliation list.
No, it's a reduction list, right? Reconciliation, reduction. What are you calling it? I mean, whatever. As a potential.
The reconciliation.
As the reconciliation list as a potential reduction.
Yes.
Okay, that's probably the right way to put it. And then we will maintain Greencastle in the budget. We won't put that on the recommendation list.
Just quickly, I will say it is the position of HHS that we do support Greencastle. So we would advocate for that funding.
I hope you support your budget.
Additional
I hope so. You guys are the ones that made us a little unsure here, but
just needed to clarify.
Okay, I appreciate that. So, and then we will get this information and share that, and then let's make sure that's just in a packet that you would be writing. So as we go over that in budget, which is, I don't know what day, but we'll figure that out and we'll make sure it comes up. And also for our MCPS partners along with at Sims, let us know. I mean, you heard about the contiguous space issue. We want to make sure it's not just a building on the other side. And to Councilmember Alvarez's point, my stepdad went to Blair too when it was Blair, and that building is like, it's like kind of like this. It's like a hodgepodge of very long buildings, and so we want to make sure that it would not just any office, but it would be something that actually makes sense to the mission of the. And if you get that back, bring that back too, and we could reconsider that at the time as well. But yes, go ahead.
Can I clarify for Sims? So again, for Sims also definitely advocate for it to receive those services. So if it's not in FY26, just ensuring that it, depending on what the building and the space issue is, because it does absolutely need it, that increased services. And really the only reason that they do have the part-time is there's just this space issue. They literally don't have the space to do more there. So once they do get the suite at Sims, then they can do more. So just making sure that at some point in the future that it does get included, that Sims can.
Well, and that would be a supplemental, or if we don't,
Yeah.
or next year's budget. But yes, absolutely. Of course, there's the need. Yeah, Councilmember Mink.
Yeah, no, first just want to triple confirm that the Greencastle is not going to require another vote of full council to keep it in the budget. Yes, thank you.
The way we're positioning it, it would require someone to motion to remove it.
Okay.
It's going to stay in right now.
Thank you for the quadruple confirm. Appreciate it. And then for Sims, if it turns out that if you are able to get the schedule or get the estimate by some miracle by full council, and it says it's going to be ready in October, or whatever the case may be, I think if we have a date and a plan that's realistic, and or even we could consider if it's going to be January, then putting like a reduced amount of the funding for that position to prorate it to start in January. That's something that we can consider as well, so that as soon as the space is ready, that you all make sure that you have the funding to be able to do the hiring in advance. That would be great. I know that timing is probably tight to get that plan done, but if we're able to do that, that would be great. Obviously, we want to make sure that we stand up that position to be ready as soon as well aligned with the readiness to have the space as well. And if the admin does have a plan for an adequate space solution, that would also be very welcome news.
Great. All right. So I think we're done with 1.1. Item 1.1 in our packet. So hopefully we will be a little more efficient going forward. But that was great. You want to move to the next item?
So the second item is also for linkages to learning services, and this is for brand new services at Burnt Mills Elementary School, totaling $200,000. Burnt Mills has approximately 766 students with an effective FARMS rate of 87.2%. And DHHS notes that Burnt Mills Elementary School was selected for a new program due to the significant increase of students participating in FARMS, which was last year at 81.4%. And DHHS notes that MCPS will provide the Linkages to Learning suite suitable for full-time services at no cost. And you can see the current health and wellness services provided at the school here on page 12. And specifically, the funding will provide a full-time family care manager, a full-time child family therapist, and the associated operating and supervisor costs to assist approximately 20 students a month in therapy services and 32 families a month in case management services. And similarly, per the council president's proposed budget approach, council staff recommends for consideration placing either of the following tranches onto the executive's recommended enhancement onto the reconciliation list. So the first is opening similar to Greencastle and Silver Spring, which is suite related, to the size of the suite, but an example of $100,000 for a part-time program at Burnt Mills, or to postpone the expansion to Burnt Mills Elementary School, so the full $200,000 for linkages to learning services at that site.
All right. Well, why don't we hear first from the team and what your assessment of why this was included in the budget and any comment on the issues that were just raised related to space or timing and staffing.
So a tiny bit of history on Burnt Mills. So Burnt Mills is in a brand new building. And so when the construction was planned, Burnt Mills' FARMS rate was much lower. So we know the demographics of Burnt Mills has changed a lot. So it was not designed with a linkages suite to it, but we know that their needs have increased greatly recently. And so they've been advocating for a linkages. It's a school that absolutely needs it based on the changes in the demographics and the populations that they're serving. I went and visited the school. They have a beautiful space available for us. The principal's completely on board and definitely wants the linkages services there. And so it would, work very well to bring those services. The school already has a MCPS community school liaison, which is why it's just a therapist and a care manager. But we would work with that person related to the outreach and the services that can be provided there.
Got it. So ready to go, have the space, could implement it. This is obviously one of the schools, Chair Alvarez mentioned this earlier, where we've had a huge influx of refugees, and the needs have changed very quickly.
Yes.
District Councilmember May.
Okay, appreciate being able to keep it short on this one. Needs have, of course, greatly increased. I got a text from the principal this morning. I got a text from a parent at the school this morning. I got a text from Action in Montgomery this morning. The needs are high here, and this was something that actually during last year's budget process, I was very frustrated that we didn't have funding for linkages at Burnt Mills, and it is because of that they don't have a construction project coming up, so they weren't even in the list. And what I asked for at that time was a plan for how we were going to get services to schools that don't have a major construction project coming up, because we are now a county where we are seeing a lot of these dramatic changes in population, and it does change kind of how we need to look at the scheduling. And so I was really grateful to see that the work that was put into this by this team as well as by the school to come up with that plan. That is the plan that is before us, and I look forward to making sure that this is funded in the budget.
All right. Any comments from colleagues? Okay, so I think I agree with the district council member, so I think we want to leave this in and not put anything for reduction. So without objection, let's go to the next one.
The final enhancement for linkages to learning is related to pay differentials for bilingual or multilingual therapists. The executive is recommending $65,000 to help increase the current pay differential provided by the vendors who oversee the contractors who provide therapy services through linkages to learning. So DHHS estimates the increase would provide an additional about $4,300 to $6,500,000 per year per therapist for 10 to 15 therapists, and that's on top of the current $2,500 to $6,500 pay differential provided on average to the bilingual and multilingual therapists. Council staff would also like to note that in fiscal year 25, the executive's recommended budget included a $150,000 increase for pay differentials. And at that committee session, it was explained that the true need was actually $300,000. But unfortunately, the council was unable to approve any of those increases last year. So council staff, in correlation with the council president's proposed budget approach, recommends placing, similarly to the previous two tranches related to the pay differential. So the first is $30,000, which would provide approximately 7 bilingual therapists with a supplemental pay differential, so about 7 therapists would not be receiving it, or the $65,000, which is the entire amount, so maintaining the existing current pay differentials for all bilingual therapists as provided by the vendors. So,
All right. Thank you so much. I'll turn to my colleague. I'll say my view is that we would maintain the C's recommendation. These are folks that we cannot afford to lose. There's not enough of them. And we've seen the charts, those in the E&C committee and probably my other colleagues, of how fastly our EML population is rising, trajectory-wise. And I think this, we want to hang on to these folks and hire more. But, Councilmember Lukey.
Is there any hope or plan that instead of using contractors in the future, we would hire them to be county employees, or no?
No, Linkages is entirely contractors, so it's the full Linkages contract.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mink.
Yeah, just noting that I know that there's efforts to diversify the languages that you're seeking for those bilingual therapists as well. And so we need these tools. I know that's why that's in the request. I also support keeping it in.
All right, so we'll, without objection, we'll maintain the county executive's recommendation.
all right. So moving now on to our school health nursing staff under the public health services area in DHHS. The first recommendation is to include $1,496,275 for 11 new community schools, school nurses. So as noted, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future requires a dedicated nurse in every designated community school. And on the bottom of page 13, you can see those 11 elementary schools that will be receiving the new dedicated community school nurses. And as this is a requirement, there is no recommendation to place on the reconciliation list.
Got to do it. We need our nurses, and they should be there. So without objection.
And then similarly, DHHS and the county executive is recommending proposing $225,444 for 3 new nurse managers to help oversee and supervise the school health staff, including school health nurses and school health technicians. On page 14, you'll see a summary of the services that the nurse managers provide, including the supervisory role, but also provision of health services in compliance with the state and local professional requirements, reporting and analyzing data, and collaborating with partners. Currently, there are 13 nurse managers and nurse administrators who oversee approximately 34 school nurses and health room technicians each, and that's a total of 384 merit school health staff. And just for the record, we wanted to note what the current policy is for school nurses. So 1 nurse per high school, 1 nurse per middle school, 1 nurse per every 3 elementary schools, and every community school requires that dedicated nurse staff. And CPS has identified a total of 77 community schools for the upcoming school year. DHHS also notes that the Association of State and Territorial Directors of Nursing recommends a nurse manager to nurse ratio of 1:8, and currently it's 1:34, and that DHHS is looking to hopefully advance and lower that ratio as the years move forward. And council staff notes the new nurse manager positions include an FY26 6-month lapse due to the hiring process. And as mentioned in our DHHS overview session and other sessions, that as other factors on the federal and state and local levels are impacting workforce, that could change potentially. And DHHS has noted that they will be able to address any faster hiring than the 6-month lapse. The annualization for fiscal year 27 would be $65,598 per nurse manager. And so per the council president's proposed budget for this year, the council staff recommends adding 3 tranches onto the reconciliation list as potential options, and that would be one for each nurse manager at $75,148.
Appreciate that. So, Matt, why don't we, any information just to start us off about how you think these folks would impact the system and what's currently happening with our nurses in our schools?
Sure. So I'm happy to start and then turn it over to Becca. So I have been in this role for a little over a year, and one of the things that I did was really meet with the team, understand the day-to-day work. These are not just managers for the sake of management. They are actually providing clinical supervision and quality assurance. So this is actually an issue of clinical safety and clinical quality. Right now, each of these managers, as you saw, are managing about 34 staff, but they're also managing at least 2 programs. And I would like to just briefly share kind of what this looks like on the ground. So when nurses call out, their kids are sick or what have you, and we don't have a sub, not only is that nurse manager managing the staff, but they're now backfilling for the school. On top of that, they're each managing 1 to 2 programs. So you have a nurse manager that is doing all of the supervision, but also overseeing the teen pregnancy prevention program, for example, which means that many of these programs, which are critical for supporting our students or ensuring licensure and things for our other staff, it's almost impossible to balance all of it. So, sometimes the nurse managers are running around just to make sure that they can get there to give the kids the insulin. They can't be there all day. The principals get frustrated with us because they're like, I have no one to cover our health room. But unfortunately, we're not able to address that issue. So this request would be one step in getting us to a more, not just equitable workload, but ensuring that we are able to provide safe and effective care, that we're able to provide that quality assurance, that we're able to meet the ever-changing and increasing state mandates and regulations for all of the health requirements that continue to change for our health rooms as well. Becca, would you add anything?
And just if you could, as you answered, so there's 3 positions, right? Like, so one of the options is like, obviously you need help here. 1 in 34 is not great. What would each position do to the ratio? Like, would 3 positions take you down to, where would that get you? What would 2 positions? You know what I mean? Just the context of if we had to put 1 on the list, what would that do for you?
Yeah, so Beck Kaurgis again from the Senior Administrator for School Health. So if we go by the recommendation, it's 1 to 8, 1 nurse supervisor to like 8 staff. However, that's not really ideal in our budget situation. So we try to do it 1 to 15, 1 supervisor to 15 staff. That's how we came up with 13. Yes, 13 like 3 nurse supervisors will be needed. But right now we are understaffed with the nurse supervisor position. However, if you look at the trend, over the years, the number of students have been increasing and the number of nurses has been increasing. Just like today, we added 11 more nurses. It has been happening for the past few years, but the supervisor position stayed flat. We haven't been increasing the number, but having 3 more, and then we already got 2 more previously. Having these 3 more nurse supervisors would significantly support the nurse supervisor to staff ratio, but we can do the math, and I can provide the exact amount, I think.
Yeah, each nurse manager would reduce the overall management load by like one person. So if we added 3 positions, it would bring the ratio down to 24. Sorry, that's what I said before is not correct, not by 1 person. If we added 3 more nurse manager positions, it would bring the ratio down to 24. staff per nurse.
24.
1 to 24.
It was down 10 from.
Correct, yes,
So
thank
not
you.
where it would be, but better than it is.
Better than 34, 35.
Okay. I'll just hear what my colleagues have to say. Councilor Alvarez.
So we've come a long way with this conversation. Councilmember Chawanda will remember in the 19th council, we were shocked to learn that, not every school had a school health nurse, and many of them were already being shared among multiple schools, and that, of course, didn't take into account when somebody called out sick. And we have all know and are familiar with the stories of all of the obligations that are put upon our school health nurses, especially now. And you can draw a straight line between the special education conversations we've been having in the Education and Culture Committee, because that also brings additional support needed by our school health nurses. So, this particular program I've always been very concerned about. I mean, I remember vividly having school health nurses literally in tears in my office, briefing me on the current situation, and just feeling strongly that they're doing this out of a mission, personal mission, and they could have been nurses anywhere, but they just felt that they needed to be here. So I think we need to continue, in my opinion, on this phasing in, providing the appropriate support structure that we should have had all along. So I will support adding all 3 positions, because I know how critical they are. But I did want to ask, we continue to have challenges hiring for our nurse positions. How confident are you all that we will be able to fill these positions, in light of the current hiring environment?
We can, I can say for sure, we should be able to hire, fill those positions. 11, in the process may take longer, but we should be able to fill those positions, because we do have some substitute nurses who've been asking for, merit status. We can easily, switch those, and then from outside also, we've been hearing actually lately that some nurses have been laid off from other departments because of what's happening right now, and that they may easily also come to us, and we can easily hire them too.
And I will note, we just closed a few months ago, I think it was 14 nurse positions.
Yes.
14 nurse positions, and we were able to hire and make offers. Those are in various places because of the background checks and things of that nature. But yeah, I'm not saying that there is an abundance of nurses. We know that's not true, but I don't anticipate. I think we will be able to hire them.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Lukey.
So I just wanted to clarify, because our enrollment numbers have kind of been, they had dipped, and they've kind of stayed flat over the past few years within MCPS. But how long has the ratio been 34-1?
And I also want to just
Yes, to
when
our
you say
historic.
that the ratio, because Councilmember Alvarez was giving me PTSD. There's 2 issues. There's the ratio of nurse managers to staff, which is what we're talking about here.
Right.
Then there's the other ratio of nurses to schools.
Yes.
Which
And
is a different issue.
I'm not talking about the ratio of with the students to the total number of nurses and the elementary school rotation, and because that's a whole, we could spend a lot of time on that. But what I do want to know is how long we've been in the situation where we've had 1 nurse manager per 34 nurses.
So when I became a school nurse in 2001, my name is, well, thank you for asking. My name is Mark Hodge. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and School Health Services historian. So when I became a school nurse in 2001, my supervisor at the time had 40 employees that she oversaw. When I became a nurse manager and then a nurse administrator in school health services, I supervised 40, 45. So we kept, and that was a time when MCPS was growing exponentially.
Right.
And the number of nurse positions were increasing, but we didn't add any new school-based or any new nurse managers to that to that complement. As we started increasing the number of school-based health and wellness centers, we built into that for every 6 centers, a new nurse manager was set. We didn't do that for school health, unfortunately. So about 8 or so years ago, we started having the conversation with the county executive and with OMB about adding nurse managers for every new school that came on board, but also that that's when we started implementing the one nurse in every high school, which is extremely large in general. Our high school is one nurse in every middle school, and then one nurse for every large elementary school, which we flipped to community schools when that happened, when the community schools started a few years ago. So now, knowing that we have all these extra nurses, again, we still didn't build in the number of nurse managers to accommodate that. And then so the pressures have just built and built. So it was, I think at its highest, it was 1 to 45 or 46. We have added nurse managers because of the school-based health centers, which has helped us a little bit to now to the 1 to 35. But yeah, we've only dipped because we've added nurse managers, but it's a long history of large numbers of people.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, well, Councilmember Alvarez suggested that we maintain. I'm comfortable with that if I have colleagues.
I would prefer to put them in and
To tranche them?
the council staff's recommendation just for further consideration and discussion, because it's not that we're not meeting a state requirement. I certainly understand the need. I also understand the need to balance with some other things we have going on, and hearing that this has been an almost 25-year history that we, thank you, Mr. Hodge, for reciting that we're going more nurse positions too that help meet certain needs. I'd rather tranche those and have a different discussion about that amongst the full council.
Okay, so Councilmember Mink, do you have a point of view?
I mean, again, I have concerns about making cuts in this space because it's not, the need has grown yes, it's been going on for a long time, but the need has also accelerated. So I have concerns about that. It looks like your finger is reaching for a button. No, oh no.
All right, yeah, so just to get a sense, I'm comfortable with keeping it. I'm happy to, you can reflect, if you're okay, 3-1, that we've kept it in, and then Councilor Lukey would prefer to tranche it, so that'll be reflected in the packet. All right, thank you so much. So we can move to the next item?
Yes, so the next items are all proposed reductions from the county executive. And so most of them are relating to either underperforming contracts or different scopes within it. So the first is for the Lead for Life contract, which is a reduction of $63,726, where DHHS states the vendor is unable to meet the minimum number of youth served and has been unable to fill a significant vacancy, limiting their ability to meet the scope of the contract. In fiscal year 24, 69 youths were served, and in fiscal year 25, as of December, 62 youths were served. And Lead for Life helps stay and reduce the number of youth and young adults entering the juvenile system, out-of-home placements, and the youth recidivism rate.
All right, and so these are things that the county executive said to not fund. This one falls into, who was managing this contract? Okay. Anything you want to add?
So we don't anticipate any impact on it. So this is more of a kind of an outreach and finding the youth, but they are not actually providing any of the services to the youth. And so we are not anticipating any impact by eliminating this contract.
Without objection.
The next is relating to the YMCA Every Mine and Shepherd Pratt contract for therapeutic recreation services, and I will just clearly explain that for this contract, that it is not eliminating these services. In fact, DHHS is expanding them, and it's moving and transitioning to the title of therapeutic mentoring. And so that big paragraph in the middle on page 15 really dives deep into therapeutic mentoring and how it's a youth-oriented, trauma-informed, culturally relevant, developmentally sound, creative, and engaging approach for youth. However, the piece that is being reduced was in a not yet implemented of case management scope as part of that contract. However, DHHS notes that they still provide case management through several programs, including 85 of the highest need schools in the county, through Linkages to Learning, high school wellness centers, Bridge to Wellness, and through the cluster projects.
I appreciate that, and I know Mr. Cardona, I don't know if he's still here, or if I saw him earlier. He mentioned these services that former Councilmember Reamer and I put some money in the budget in the supplemental, I don't know, six years ago or so to kick them off. They are super important because not everyone needs a full, one-on-one therapist relationship, but can have it tied to something. So glad it's still happening, but certainly defer to DHHS on how it's implemented. Just gave you a shout out, Mr. Cardona. So, so anyone have a comment on that? So without objection.
All right. The next is a $27,000 reduction for the therapeutic recreation contract with Play Ball Academy due to underperformance as well. And so this contract began during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Play Ball Academy provides athletic training and development in baseball, softball, basketball, football, bocce ball, and other sports. DHHS has determined that due to the poor enrollment and return to pre-pandemic extracurricular activity structures that the contract is no longer needed. And you can see at the top of page 16 the rate of students served, that the minimum was 1,000 families in the Down County and East County communities. However, the max served was about 725 students during that time.
Got it. So not that these services aren't, but we've gone back to traditional things. There's other ways to serve. Any comments you want to make on this one, Mr. Cardona? You don't have to. Okay. All right. So without objection.
All right. The next is a $192,178 reduction to eliminate the expansion of Positive Youth Development contract with the Latin American Youth Center, which is also no longer needed. And DHHS has stated that additional funding from dual settlement funds will help provide additional services through the Rec Mode contract as well, which serves the same target population as the Latin American Youth Center, and that the Latin American Youth Center did not adequately meet the minimum number of youth served for this contract as well, looking at between 75 to 143 youth served during the fiscal years.
All right, so let's talk about this one a little bit. Councilmember Mink, you can ask the question, but why don't you start with your view, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Mink.
Yes, just to clarify, as many of you became familiar, post-pandemic, we saw a dire need to serve younger populations. Okay, we're in constant conversations of middle schoolers, in particular the middle school area, in the Mid-County area, Aspen Hill, Glenmont areas, those particular clusters. And so as part of our Youth Safety, Youth Harm initiative, we wanted to begin to shift to address those immediate crises that were going on. We saw a complete change in the risk factors, primarily in this population. So hence, that was their intent of moving in this direction to a program that we saw offers a best practice that is doing an outstanding job engaging this population, and not just the middle schools. I mean, they're engaging elementary school children, families, and whatnot. But that's really, at the end of the day, kind of where we went. We had conversations with the vendor. They had shared with us that they really did not have the skill set to work with that younger population. That was not what they were accustomed to doing. And so that's how we went in that direction.
Okay. Councilmember Mink.
Appreciate that context. What I noticed here, and that is giving me some heartburn and questions, is that it seems clear that everybody agrees and has agreed for a number of years here that this work is important, and making sure that we reach this group of kids is important, and that this says for 2.44 here, no longer needed, and that's because it's being replaced, right? It's moving out LAYC because they're not serving, as noted, the population, but it's not because we don't need to serve that population. So I'm confused as to why I'm concerned about that the replacement is one-time funding. So this is really amounting to a reduction in the operating budget, and I don't see fiscally, operationally, why we would want to do that, because we know that this is going to be something that we are going to then want to return and have in the budget for the year after that. Does anybody from the exec branch want to? Is that an awkward question? Does OMB want to speak to that, or?
I know that you don't want to speak on behalf
Is
of
it, is the, or maybe, yeah.
Deborah Lambert, Office of Management and Budget. It is always possible that in a future year, we may continue with rec mode. I mean, rec mode right now is a pilot to see how it works in the youth development space. If it works, then we will continue with rec mode. But right now, we don't have that assessment. So the rec mode has just recently been added to the suite. And so for the year, fiscal year 26, we don't feel as though we need to have both.
So, well, when you say both, right, I understand that, and I understand that, that rec mode in particular, that this will be their first year serving this particular, of course, not their first year working with population that's comparable to this, but their first year filling this particular role of replacing LAYC here. But is the intention to serve, right, the funding that has been in this space to serve this group of youth that has been there since, I mean, we have at least FY22 through now, the intention would be to continue to serve that population after next year. So I'm just, I'm wondering if it would make more sense for us to instead of putting them on the dual settlement funds, to instead say, look, we know that we want to continue this serving this group of youth, having those funds in the operating budget, doing the RFP, having them apply through that. You know, if they don't work out, it could be somebody else the next year also. But I just want to make sure that in FY27 and following, that those funds are still going to be there, that there's continuity. And so I don't know that it makes sense to move that bucket of funding out onto, unless the intention is to say maybe we're not going to continue funding these, this group of young people, but it looks like the intention has been and is continuing to be to do that. And so this seems like kind of putting operating funds onto one-time funding. So would that be logistically possible? If right now the plan is to put rec mode onto dual settlement funds, right? Have those funds already been, what's the process for that? Would it be possible to not do that? Or if there's a difference between the contract amount and this, would it be possible to keep these funds in the operating budget to do the RFP? What are the logistics here? To do the RFP, let rec mode apply, and then if they were the selected vendor through that process, then those dual settlement funds could be used for something else.
We'd have to go back to the county executive and executive staff to determine, you know, what we would have to do to make that different.
Okay, well, I guess that would be my question then. I guess I have concerns again about putting what is clearly ongoing, something that we want to fund on an ongoing basis, shifting them onto one-time funds, and I'm concerned that we're setting ourselves up to then have to fight for those funds as if they're new funds again, when I don't think that's anybody's intention here.
Yeah, I mean, I think typically and I'm going to turn to Councilman Roberts, if the rec, what is the rec mode contract? Is it for this amount, or how much is the rec mode pilot?
I think it's for $250,000.
Okay, so it's a little more. 240? Okay. So obviously, even though it's technically a one-time expense, it sounds like should it perform the way you would like it to see perform, it would be something that you'd come back for in future years.
Yes.
And should it be included in the budget in future years? I think for the purposes of budgeting, that would be considered not a change from the previous year. It wouldn't be considered necessarily new.
It was last year.
Yeah.
Budget process.
No, yeah, well, that's a question. I think typically, you know, Councilman Rounds has done 20 budgets. As you know, my understanding is that money's in there. We put it in. You're gonna the 240. You're gonna do that program. If next year you come back with a similar amount, I would view that as continuing something that's already happened.
No, because it's going to be on grant funds. It's teed up.
Because you're using that through settlement. It's not our money.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so it would be new. It would be new.
Even though it's not a new program, it hasn't been, and that's not the.
Okay. Let me not skip. I skipped Councilman Rounds, and then I'll go to Councilman Luke. Yeah, go ahead.
So just a couple thoughts. I know that as we speak, the administration is in the process of implementing an enhanced positive youth development initiative that I know Dr. Davis has been facilitating many meetings with stakeholders, both internally within the executive branch, sister county agencies such as MCPS, but then also nonprofit organizations. So it's sort of the evolution of the Positive Youth Development Initiative that we started when I was working in the executive branch. So, and let me just make a point. I'm always hesitant, reluctant when we talk about minimum numbers of kids served. Obviously, that's an important data point, but we also know that oftentimes the kids that are served have very complex needs and issues and require more time and attention by the staff, which may then, kind of compete with the minimum of number served. Because if the kids that are being served have deeper needs, we just can't lose sight of the fact that there are youth being served. That often is a cross-section when having conversations such as this. Having said that, I know that I have a great deal of trust in the Department of Health and Human Services, and I know they don't reach these decisions lightly. But I also know that we're looking at strategies moving forward that are a little bit more holistic. So I am disappointed, having LAYC being near and dear to my heart, but I also acknowledge and yield to the subject matter experts here who are on the ground, managing this contract, managing these programs, and I know that you wouldn't put these kids out. So having said that, I agree with the hesitation to move forward exclusively with the Jewel funds, but Ms. Clements-Johnson, I'm actually going to phone a friend here. We did have a session about the Jewel funds, and you may need to get back to us because I'm catching it flat-footed here. And Councilmember Lukey reminded me that this was among the conversations that we had during that session. And so if we can come back to this issue specifically, I'm not sure that that changes my support for the executive branch's recommendation, but I would like more information so that we can better understand how this is going to be used within the Jewel funds and especially other programs and services too. I do think there's been multiple instances in which, although last year's budget process left a lot to be desired, candidly, and it was awkward too, to be fair, because there were a lot of programs that were funded with COVID funds that weren't technically new, but new to the county's budget, and so they were treated as new. It got very awkward, and frankly, some things slipped through the cracks that shouldn't have, and we want to avoid that here. But in this instance, I do think it's not inappropriate to use Jewel funding, give this program a chance to breathe and get going. And then I do have confidence we will revisit this as part of this more broad strategy that Dr. Davis is working on putting together now, and knowing this will be an important component of that. So that's how I'm feeling.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm remembering having the discussion with you all at the and Dr. Davis, and thank you, Mr. Cardona, because I remember I had very specific questions at that hearing about the settlement funds for the Jewel settlement, whether it had been blessed by council as being applicable to the types of activities that we were then going to be funding with the settlement funds, and whether this program, and there were, I think, two others, and Luis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there were two other youth engagement programs, I would say, that were not like overtly health focused, but were health focused, if that makes sense, right? So it was the way to get at the kids in terms of healthy living and healthy choices, but without focusing it on, this is about cessation, this is about not using Jewel, right? Or tobacco, or whatever else you want to choose. So I thought, had at that time gotten that full overview of the strategy of where you all were on tackling these issues and why you were trying different directions and different programmatic ways of engaging. And then, of course, when I read this and it's saying, I get the whole issue about minimum number of youths, and I appreciate Councilmember Albernoz's points about that, but, it says outreach no longer aligns with current vision and community needs. Two really important things. right? Because the department has been doing this work. You are the ones delivering these programs. You're the ones overseeing these programs. And you're the ones figuring out what is it that needs to be adjusted or dealt with in order to best reach our target populations now. And the agency has made that choice. And it's not this program. So I'm comfortable with taking the recommendation that's in there, which is to say that this was not included in the budget, and the reasoning why. I respect your choices. I respect that the dual funding I get is settlement funds that are one-time funds, and then there's going to be an assessment, and y'all are going to figure out what's working, what's not working, get rid of the things that aren't working, readjust, or try something new. And you always have that right. And every budget cycle will involve that, because we shouldn't be keeping things that are stale or not needed. And we should be adapting to the changing needs of our community, and especially given the environment we have now and the budget situation we're in. One, needs are going to be evolving, and we're going to have to continue assessing and adjusting. And two, we shouldn't fund duplicative things that we're not going to do. You're just not going to have that contract. So I'm comfortable with as presented in the packet for item 2.4. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Councilmember Mank. Just to be clear, the action here today is to just accept that reduction. The reasoning is that you're going to do the rec mode program with dual funds. Now that and so doing the rec mode program with dual funds makes it a one-time expense, as was discussed. If we didn't, and I know it seems like the majority doesn't want to do this, but if you didn't accept this cut, it would have to, any funding would have to go on to the reconciliation list for the purposes of rec mode or whatever you were going to use it for. Is that correct? Just to be clear on process.
That's correct.
Okay. Councilman Rank, do you make a comment?
Yeah, is the intention by PYD to continue funding a program like this, whether it's an LAYC or now rec mode or something else in the future? Is this a gap that you intend to continue filling programmatically after FY26, or is that a maybe only?
You're referring to the rec mode program specifically?
So the LAYC, the students that they serve, the population that they serve, right, which is being replaced by rec mode, is the intention to continue serving that gap?
So one of the other contracts that we have is for the Youth Opportunity Center, the Down County Youth Opportunity Center. And as some of you may or may not be familiar with, we have also restructured that program to meet the needs of 2025, which is now the programs are going directly into the same targeted communities that many of these young people come from. So when we made that decision, we really did an analysis and said, okay, can those services fill the gap in? And that's how we came to the conclusion saying, okay, let's go in this direction.
Okay, so there is potential. So if rec mode uses the dual funds for the coming year, then there is potential that you would not need anything in the operating budget for a program like that for the year following, because you have reorganized and you're standing up these other programs?
Well, the thing is that with the rec mode program in itself, we're trying to meet a huge need, not just in Mid-County, but even into the East County area now. Right. And so it just came on good timing. And, I just want to acknowledge Dr. Bridges, because, he really said, look, let's tap into this. They've been doing work already around anti-vaping work. They've done several forums in the community. Just the whole opioid thing, and many of us, I'm sure, heard of the tragedy of Dave Kennedy's son. And so he has really put a lot of passion and commitment to work in this arena.
Yeah, and part of my interest in this is because I know that rec mode has expanded recently into East County, and that was through my request. We really had the need there, and they're based in Wheaton, right? But they have stood up partnerships with the county to be able to, and thank you for your work on that, to be able to provide services in East County that are tremendously valuable. And so I certainly, when we have a contract that's not working, as as Councilmember Lukey described, I totally agree that we should not continue to fund that contract. And really, I appreciate that the public is able to see the analysis and the work in multiple categories that has gone through to reflect those reductions, and that those deep dives are being done, and I think it really reflects a responsible use of taxpayer dollars. I also, for the other reductions that have been described, it is accompanied by an explanation of why either we don't need those services, that's not a gap that needs to be filled anymore, or how else in the budget those services are being provided, because we know that that's still a need, and we want to make, this is different. This is the one outlier where what we have is a situation where there's an underperforming or not the right fit contractor, and so they're being cut appropriately, but instead of being filled by something else that's in the budget, they are being put on, that gap is being filled by somebody who's put on one-time funds. So this is different from everything else that's in this list, which is why it stood out to me, because that concerns me, and I know that they serve a really very much in need population, including in my district. And so while I am certainly comfortable cutting a contract that's not working, I am concerned about cutting the funds to a department that's going to be working to provide those, to serve this population moving forward. So maybe what my ask here would be is if we could have another opportunity to I think we need more information and to dive into this and return to this conversation at full council with a better understanding of how we are going to ensure continuity of services. And so I would ask that we either reject this cut, except what I don't want to do is indicate that we're trying to keep funding LAYC for this, because I think even LAYC is indicating, right, that they're not the appropriate vendor here. So maybe we accept the cut, and I don't know how we want to indicate this, but my intention would be to say we want to keep this funding in the budget or on the rec list for discussion about whether we actually do want to move forward with accepting the cut of this level of funding, and ask for the executive branch to come back with a little more information, again, about how we're going to assure continuity of services despite moving it onto one-time funds, or whether we don't need,
Yeah, I think in this instance, I think we should accept the cut. This is what let me give you a counter proposal here. Yeah, say it again. Yeah, we could defer, but let's hear what Mr. Hodge has to say.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, I need clarification, so if the department needs to come back in front of full council, that we can actually answer your question. So, so this is about the fact that LYAC doesn't matter at this point as part of your conversation. This is about you wanting to guarantee that in FY27 there are funds available for rec mode or any other.
They don't go away.
But that they don't go away. The fact that they're part of dual funding for FY26, there is a possibility that if the dual funding dries up, or well, we're going to get it for 11 years, I think. But if we choose to use it for a different reason, that we'll continue to use rec mode or somebody else to provide these services.
Exactly.
Okay, so EC Chair Joando is correct. You could do that today by just putting it on the reconciliation list and putting it in the base budget yourself. And that means that we then have that $240,000 in dual funds to use for something else. So you could do that today. There's nothing that we can share at full council that will change that fact. So if you're looking for some stability in that, and the budget's new every year, we can offer that as a cut next year for the county executive if that doesn't work, if it ends up in the base budget. So that's really at this moment your choice about how you want to fund that for future years, whether it's the base budget or one-time only.
And I will note that because it was not included in your base budget, it would have to be in addition to this budget, and we would have to find a commensurate cut from somewhere else. So for that reason, I'm not comfortable doing it, and I think we should just accept the cut and note Councilmember Mink's, and I think others' interest in that this work is important, and that however it's funded going forward, we'll be looking at that throughout the year and next year's budget, that we don't want to see a reduction in these services. I would agree with that sentiment, but I think from a budgeting standpoint, we should just accept the cut. That would be my recommendation.
I hear you. I think that also that Coach Albert has raised a good point about if this was a gap that was being filled through other programs, I'd be comfortable with it too. But I just don't think that case has actually been.
Yeah, I mean, they made the determination to use Jewel funds to fund the rec mode. They made the determination to cut this. And it's obviously, we have final budget authority. We could say, no, we don't. So we're not really saying, we're happy in the sense that you're still funding the stuff. Councilmember Mink's point is, which I share the sentiment, we want to make sure we keep funding it, but we can do that in the budget as we go forward.
And I just,
Yeah, Councilmember.
just to clarify, the HHS committee recommended the full council to approve the special appropriation for the Jewel settlement back in January. So that was already done, and the Jewel settlement funds, as Mr. Hodge noted, come in buckets over time. They're not paid out all at once. So, and they have specific criteria associated with them. This just happens to fit into a use that can be done with it. But that gives, again, HHS that flexibility over time with each new arrival of those settlement funds as to how it wants to allocate it based on what worked, what didn't, and how things are going and what the needs and expectations of the community are. So.
Well, that's the will of the committee.
No, it was a good discussion. I think we, with you in spirit, and I think, and it actually will be, it's good for you all to know going forward to next year's budget as part of the evaluation process. And I would associate myself with the comment that I don't think we need to be taking steps backwards in PYD funding, and this is an example of that. So for now, do you want it to be noted?
Yeah, can I make an ask related to that then for the note?
Sure. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, if we could note that, again, I'm not trying to keep the LAYC contract, trying to keep the gap filled. If we could change the language, maybe instead of saying no longer needed, replaced by, to say something like that it's being replaced by one-time funding with the rec mode contract, or by grant funding for something like that.
That can be noted in there.
Like with intention to continue
So
funding.
it's 3-1, accepting the cut with the note that Councilmember Mink was just concerned about the one-time versus ongoing nature of Jewel funding. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
All right. The final proposed executive reduction is the family intervention contract with YMCA, noting that it began in 2022 to provide basic social service needs, fundamental life skills, and healthy choices for the students and families they were serving, and that they had not been able to meet the minimum number of 40 families served, nor fully utilizing the allocated funds, and that shows in fiscal year 22 through 24, about 18 to 28 families, and $86,237,000 of unused funds per year, depending.
Yeah, okay, great. It makes sense, but where's this going? Where's this to our previous conversation? What's happening with this proposed set of work? Where is it going, or is it going anywhere, or is it just not going to happen?
So as you learn often from pilots, sometimes there's a lot of good intention. We acknowledge the fact that we had support to fund a very important endeavor. Unfortunately, the program itself really struggled to do what it was intended to do. And when this whole pilot was developed, the intent was to kind of create a parallel to what the Street Outreach Network does, but for the parents. And so on my end, we're working to figure out in the future, and especially now with a lot of the recommendations that came out of the Youth Safety, Youth Harm Committee headed by Dr. Davis, is what is family strengthening going to look like moving forward? Because I think all of us can agree that that is one of the biggest gaps in our county is the work with families. But we found that this approach was not getting us to where we need to be.
Back to the drawing board, trying to figure out what might be another approach in this area.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any comments? You guys good? All right, so without objection.
Okay, thank you. And now, if the chair agrees to skip forward to page 19 to discuss CIP amendment before we loop back into the operating budget with Ms. Clemens Johnson.
You're going to come back to Lighthouse at the end.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So, the county executive has transmitted a CIP amendment for the High School Wellness Center and Expanded Wellness Services project. The adjustment specifically shifts $3.9 million out of fiscal year 26 and $2.9 million $2 million into fiscal year 27 and $1.9 million into fiscal year 28. And that is just to reflect the updated expenditure schedule to align with the actual expected 3-year completion timeline for Springbrook High School's Wellness Center. Originally, the total amount of $4.5 million was allocated in fiscal year 26. And so this will just reflect the true schedule to design, build, and construct the Springbrook High School Wellness Center.
We're excited about the Springbrook High School Wellness Center, and I was just there for one of our budget forums, so they're all excited. So without objection,
All right.
Ms. Clemens Johnson,
Thank you.
our final item.
Yes, final item. We are discussing the Lighthouse initiative, excuse me, for $7,089,067.12 FTEs. This is a 5-year one-time item. We just know that that's how it comes over in the budget, but this program, I will say, with 5+ years is longstanding. This program is a coordinated system of care, providing navigation, referrals, and case management that respond to the needs of the county's immigrants community. The program is really foundationally supporting children, thus their families as well. I will highlight on the page 17 that the budget is slightly less than last year. This reflects the reduction of a strategic planning item. And then also, if you look at the details of the budget, there's a big shift in operating from Lighthouse Services to Lighthouse Program Administration. That just reflects moving some contractual items in more of the administration operations sections of the budget. There is detail in your packet about the vacancies. I will call attention to the mention of the grant application process that will begin soon. County staff wasn't provided details on what the grants would be, so the committee may want to learn more about what the grant programs, how much money will be provided to the community, and maybe how many organizations may be eligible to access those funds. So council staff concurs with the county executive's recommendation of this 5-year one-time item.
Got it. Thank you. Good to see you. I'll turn to my co-chair, Councilman Ramos.
No, I just, at a high level, I just want to acknowledge and thank the folks that are on the ground doing this work. That work has become much more difficult in the last 4 months, and so this speaks very much to our county's values and our priorities and our commitment to welcoming everyone who resides in Montgomery County. I'm proud of this initiative, proud that I live in a county that supports initiatives like this, and appreciate and respect the work.
Hear, hear. Yes, and Councilmember Lukey.
Yes, echoing Councilmember Albernaz's statements and knowing how challenging things are at this time. Thank you for the table you put on page 19 that talks about the different categories of services that are being helped with. Understanding or knowing, because there's not like I am one person, I need help with one thing ratio, right? Many of the folks who are being served are going to need more than one of these things, and everybody's needs assessment is going to be different depending on their circumstances. Not that I expect you to know this today, but at some point, could you just give us an update on the total number of people who are being served, recognizing that they may need services in more than one space and place that are being provided through Lighthouse?
Good morning, everyone. Dora Keene Rosarian, HHS. Very happy to provide that information for consideration. And you're absolutely right. Families come in with multiple needs, and the numbers that we have here reflect a variety of needs being requested and provided to the families coming in through Lighthouse. Our partners are very diligent in making referrals to the network of organizations inside HHS, outside of HHS, that are able to fill these needs. So we're more than happy to return with that information.
Yeah, and if you could give us number of families and also just number of people, because we know that a family could be 2, a family could be 3 out of 4 of us, 6, and or 4, and that there's a lot of variety in there, and so when I look at a chart like this, it's not clear if one family member picks up the clothing and hygiene kit, how many people is it serving, right? Because it may be for a large family, and we certainly would want to be able to see over time too what needs are growing, and especially as we've talked multiple times in both this joint session or in HHS, children, right? And how many children are being affected. That helps us understand the relation to other services and needs that we at county government can help provide. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you for doing this really vital work. The initiative was stood up with, it's like a three-way partnership with HHS and community partners and MCPS. Is that still the intention? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So MCPS is most definitely at the table, trusted partner within this space. A lot of the families coming in do have children in MCPS, so it's very important that we work very closely together to make referrals, to identify the needs, to connect individuals with services inside and outside the network. The faith-based community is assisting in huge ways. Organizations that budding nonprofits within the county as well have risen to the occasion to say, we have capacity, we can provide housing support or food resources or clothing resources or assistance with accessing legal guidance / consultation in order to assist with the navigation of the current landscape. So yes, we continue to work closely with nonprofits, sister agencies within the county, as well as MCPS, in order to provide the entirety of the ecosystem that is this integrated network.
Great to hear, and I look forward to following up more at another time, but sometime soon, because there's so much happening, just to understand more about what that looks like. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Thank you for this work. It's super important, as my colleagues have said, and there's interest. But I think, as you've heard, without objection, we will support moving this forward, or support the CE's recommendation. And I think that's it. So we'll give you 4 minutes back, and have a great day. With that, we are adjourned.